A subject that is myself working in leadership development quite a lot, managing across the generations, a very, very hot topic. And so a warm welcome to all of you this afternoon. Let's get straight into it, because I'm conscious we've only actually got an hour with you, so which is a short time. So we've got a few things to talk about this afternoon. There we go. In terms of introductions, my name's Ed Chaxfield. I'm Senior Principal Consultant for LHH, and I work, as I just said before, in the L&D space, and I'm joined by my fantastic colleague, Shelley. Shelley, do you want to say hello to the team this afternoon?
I will. Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, I am Shelley Kay. I'm Talent Development Business Partner with Adecco.
Fantastic. So Shelley and I will be running the session this afternoon. And before we really get into the meat of the essay question, so to speak, just a few ground rules as you'd expect. Look, great to see a question already on chat. That's really encouraging. Do be prepared to participate. We will throw a few questions out there to you. So it would be great to hear some of your views. And there is a little poll there, little question for you sort of midway, which I'd love to see your view on as well. Please be open-minded. Please bring that respect to this to the chat conversation here. And please do take notes as you go along if you feel that is necessary. We are recording it, and this will be shared on completion as well. What's on the agenda this afternoon? So by the end of the session today, of course, we're going to be giving you an understanding of those different generations currently represented within our working cohort, of which there are 5. What are those characteristics of each of those generations? Shelley's going to talk to you a little bit more detail about those and how they might show up. But of course, the counterpunch to that is we need to understand how to avoid generational stereotyping as well. And of course, answering really that key question about the subject about managing across the generations, give you 1 or 2 things to think about, the skills around how you navigate and manage this multi-generational workforce. So a few things to cover off in this next 60 minutes. Okay, well, first of all, let's talk about this case for multi-generational consideration. In recent years, we have really seen a shift in the retirement age, fueled by, well, a number of factors, really. First of all, there's been the opening of the pension pot as one thinks that they're coming up on retirement, having a look in that wallet and thinking, this isn't worth quite as much as I thought it was. I think we're going to have to put a few of those trips to Antigua on hold. So deflating pension provision, that's certainly one big part of this. But also added to that, unless you've been, of course, living in a cave, you'll be obviously aware that we've got the cost of living crisis going on at the moment. I was bending someone's ear the other day. I'm talking to you today from South Devon. And I remember when I moved down South Devon in 2005, and it was 70. I still remember it was 79p for a litre of fuel. Now, at £1.55 or something eye-watering like that. So the cost of living crisis is really hitting people. So you're conflating 2 things together there already. Looking at a decreased pension pot, perhaps due to sort of turbulence in the markets, and that challenge around actually just putting food on the table. And of course, those energy bills as well being absolutely eye-watering. There's also the legal element here that we need to talk about, of course, as well. Legal protection from age discrimination. State pension age currently sits at 66. The plan is to increase that by 2028 to 67. So already the age that you can draw on that state pension is sort of moving further and further away each time you think it's within your grasp. And in fact, of course, with many professions, there's been, there's a complete removal of the necessity to retire. And I think back to my last organisation, I worked alongside 2 people in their mid-70s, adding incredible value to the team. Added this, of course, healthier population in general, so increases in life expectancy, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. And if you add all these things together, you've got real key factors that has led us to seeing, as I mentioned in my introduction there, 5 generations represented within the current workforce. So what does this mean? So gaining an understanding of the differences that exist within those generations is absolutely key to attracting and retaining talent. We are still, I believe, a very candidate-led market, in spite of the challenging economy that surrounds us. So if you want to still be that attractive employer proposition to existing colleagues and any new recruits coming in, you need to be thinking about tailoring your employee experience for each of those generations. So as I promised, what we're going to do first of all is look in general terms at those 5 generations that are represented within the workforce and some of those sort of characteristics. And I'm going to hand over to Shelley now I'm going to hand the baton to Shelley now to take that conversation forward. So Shelley, talk to us a little bit more about these 5 generations. Thank you.
Certainly, thanks, Ed. So if you can bring up the next, thank you. So let's, as Ed says, it's generally considered that we currently have 5 generations that are represented across our current working cohort. The first of those is our silent generation. If you can pop the first one up for me there, Ed. Oh, there we go. So traditionalists, also known as the silent generation, these are people born between 1928 and 1944, very much known for having their very traditional outlook. Then we have our baby boomers. So our baby boomers are born between 1945 and 1964. This is the generation who were born while there was a rapid increase in the birth rate. Then we move on to our Gen X. So Gen X were born between 1965 and 1979, a generation of so-called independent thinkers. And then we come on to our Gen Y, also called our millennials. And these were born in an era definitely of technological advancement. And then finally, we come to our much maligned Gen Z. And these are the guys that were born between 95 and 2010, it's considered. These are, well, they say it's just entering the workforce. Actually, they're well into the workforce now, this generation. These are the ones with the technical know-how. These are the ones with the global mindset. And actually, the next generation that will come up, I believe, is called Gen Alpha that is coming at us. But I don't want you necessarily to think about this as a definitive list, because actually, if you've got people who are born on kind of the cusp of the two, so anybody, for example, who is born between 94 and even 2000, they very well may have some of the traits that exist between both millennials and Gen Z. You also might find when you do research that sometimes these years seem to move around a little bit, but the dates that we've given you, the years we've given you, are the ones that are widely considered to be the correct ones for those generations. So if you can pop me onto the next screen, I just want to go through in a little bit more detail really some of those characteristics of each of those generations. So say we've got our traditionalists, broadly accepted to be very traditional in their values. So these are people who came through the Great Depression, they came through world wars, and their experience has very much shaped who they are. They're widely considered to value loyalty, security. They're considered to be the generation who are less comfortable around kind of non-traditional working practices. That's why kind of in a virtual engagement, it's not tending to be really their thing. They will tend to prefer face-to-face engagement, but they're looking for loyalty, they're looking for security, and also, you know, they are thinking about being financially prudent. The reason that they're financially prudent is because they have grown up in an era of financial prudence. Then we have our baby boomers. So these are kind of hardworking, a little bit less risk averse. But what we have to remember when we think about this is these have been brought up by their traditional silent generation parents. So they've very much taken on a lot of those behavioral traits, if you would, of the generation that they were brought up with. So again, they also tend to be quite traditional in their outlook. And let's say it is the generation where there was kind of a big boom in the birth rate, but also, you know, this is where we had lots more women that were starting to enter the workforce as well. So some real changes there. But this was the generation who were more open in terms of innovation. They've started to see some of those innovations and technology that have come through during their working time. Then moving on to our Gen X. So these were born to the more open-minded baby boomer generation. I am a Gen X, hands up, that's me.
Go Gen
Ed's
X.
putting his
Oh,
hand
yeah.
up as well. This is the generation who really coined, the term about, of wanting it all, of wanting that, working life balance. More confident with technology than the generation that came before them, expecting clarity, expecting autonomy. But again, they are the product of their baby boomer parents, so they will have definitely adopted some of those characteristics. On to Gen Y, our millennials. So they now start to build on that confidence of their Gen X parents and those that went before them, tech savvy, passionate, starting to kind of challenge authority. This is the first generation that started to talk about the idea of having meaningful and purposeful work as well. They've grown up with a more relaxed attitude. They've grown up with an expectation of technology and innovation as well. And they also have the expectation of flexibility in terms of the way they're expected to work. And then finally, I come on to, as I say, our much maligned Gen Z, because they do tend to get a bit of a bad cred, I think. And it's not all terrible, they've got lots to offer the workforce. But this is the generation that have grown up in that technological advancement that was very rapid, happening all the time. They expect their world to exist 24/7. And if you think about how our attitudes have changed to things like customer service, if we order a product online, we expect it to be delivered the next day, and if it's not there next day, we think that's unacceptable, because their world has moved very, very quickly. So they want responsiveness and access at all times. They're highly adaptable to change. That comes with growing up in an era of technology. They value authenticity like their millennial predecessors. These are the disruptors, and they are challenging the world around them as well. Ed, I think I'm passing back to you just now.
Okay, so let's have a little look at, we're going to just talk about these different images here. So what we would like to do, Shelley and I, is just to discuss these images here, and get for you on the chat what you consider potentially are the style, the capability, or a work pattern of these individuals. So we're just going to show you each one in turn, and let's get some ideas on the chat as to what you might see in terms of what you assume this individual might do. So let Shelley and I are going to have a look at on what's going to come in here in terms of the sort of potential around some of these. So over to you. So the first one is this lady here. So we're talking about working style, capability, and so on. So yeah, that's interesting, Shelley, isn't it? So maybe office-based, Katie, very loyal, James. That's nice. I like that. 9 to 5.
It's interesting, isn't it, Ed? Because obviously we're talking about generational stereotyping. And, one of the things we talk about is kind of removing stereotypes. We don't want to do it. But I think unless we actually unpack it by really starting to look at this and addressing kind of some of those kind of long-held views that each of us have, we look at somebody and we start to make judgments about them.
Absolutely. So we've got loads coming in here now. This. So yeah, we had the loyal, a very loyal individual, part-time. Maria here, structured, likes clear processes. So if we're thinking about the style and their capability, what sort of organizations like to have clear deliverables? They bring life experience, absolutely, and we're going to talk a little bit more about what a multi-generational team will bring here. Traditional, is expecting sort of the office, a traditional working environment and pattern is coming out here. Carolyn, avoiding technology. That sounds like me. Avoiding technology. There's a saying, to err is to be human, but if you want things to really go wrong, use technology. 9 to 5, sticks to the rules and processes. Sarah, thank you for that. Wants to do their best. Very customer focused. I like this.
Interesting.
Might struggle. There's loads in here. Hierarchical. Wants to avoid change. And there we were worried that we wouldn't get anything on chat there, Shelley. There you go.
And it's funny, isn't it? Because if I said to everybody on this call,
Yeah.
okay, well, this lady's actually a social media influencer. She likes, she likes producing her TikToks every day. They'd be like, really? Because we have that idea in our mind
We've decided, yeah.
of the kind of job.
Tech struggles, presenteeism, yeah. And again, we will talk a little bit. We will talk a little bit about that. See what else doesn't want to change the way things are done. So yeah, we've got very sort of quite linear 9 to 5 and so on. Wow, there's oh, interesting. Got professions here: nursing or office manager. We thought, yeah, legal. If you initially look at
Legal secretaries are one that often comes up for this one.
Yeah,
part-time working, retired, semi-retired, doing a bit of voluntary work. Those are the kinds of things that we would normally expect people to answer on this particular.
This is proud of their work. And then we'll get onto this in a moment about prefers face-to-face conversations. Probably not interested to focus on CPD, continued professional development. Yeah, possibly there. Okay. How about this one? Yeah. What do you reckon?
So this is interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because this is kind of our polar opposite, isn't it?
Polar opposite. Yeah, this is
of the kind of so there you go. You've got Stacey saying something creative, tech savvy, tech IT, flexibility. So it's all those creative industries, isn't it?
Yeah, I was interesting here just saying, where was it? Marketing. Joanne, yeah, that's interesting. Can work from anywhere, pretty tech savvy, wants to manage their own hours, social media specialist. In fact, when I first looked at this, and we were building this, yeah, let's put something you think, yeah, social media, tech savvy, Facebook ads, works from home. Interesting as well, very innovative. I think I actually had that as for my own notes as well on this one. Yeah, social media is coming up quite a lot. James McGovern here, yeah, creative, personal brand builder as well. So aware of
like
that image online, that sort of thing.
I like that suggestion. We got digital nomad, I think it was, that came up just then.
Yeah, digital expert, digital nomad. That comes quite a bit.
Absolutely. So again, if we think the opposite of our first image,
absolutely,
this individual, if you said, actually, this is somebody who works for, one of the top accountancy or law firms and is a legal partner, it doesn't fit the image that we all tend to have in our mindset, does it?
No, absolutely. Very career orientated. So flexibility coming out here, high expectations of employers, what's in it for them. Yeah, so there's confidence here coming out, would be willing to take a risk, wants to express themselves either online or, if you're meeting them face to face. So ideas, innovative, things like that. Now, last one.
Let's go for it. The third.
Yeah, then this is an interesting one. Let's see what comes up on this one. And I'm sorry, I'm just trying to scroll. There's so much data coming in here.
It's quite interesting because of the white jacket. People often look at this image and think this is somebody who works within the health service. So it's amazing how just the colour of a jacket can change our perception.
Sciencey, yeah, maybe a cook. I thought some sort of caring profession, research-based profession, academic, architect, sandwich career.
I look at this guy and I think middle senior management, somebody who's in charge of a team.
Yes. Yeah.
Again, probably that more traditional, I suppose, working hours might, likely to be within an office environment or a production environment. He looks like a magician.
really, really interesting. And in fact, I used to the leadership thing, I used to run a session on personal branding. And I used to show an image of a gentleman that was covered from head to toe in tattoos, and he was a brain surgeon. But it's very, very interesting as people are and it starting to put people into these sort of little areas and so on. Loyal, self-employed, possibly. So thank you, teacher or tutor. Yeah. So it's interesting gathering these views as we run this session, and be interesting because of course we're running it face to face tomorrow to see what comes up tomorrow as well. Okay, well look, let's and thank you for that. More of that as I sort of throw out some of those questions. let's move that conversation on a little bit now, and avoiding, and you can see how we're going to decide this about this individual and decide that about. And the first thing I'm going to do is actually start off, before we've got a little bit to hear from Simon Sinek in a moment, and I've got a few things to say, but I want to ask you a question first of all. So Vasilis, and I just want to say welcome to Vasilis as well. He's our producer here today. He's going to be looking after us. He's going to just launch a poll. And the question that we're going to launch for you is this question. What is the current life expectancy? This is UK across both men and women at the moment. Vasilis, if you're good to do the poll, is that if not, I can just ask people to throw it. Aha, there we go. We're off. So there you go. You've got 96, 92, yeah, see, 92, 81, 78, and 75. And they're good this afternoon. So engaged.
And of course, the thing about this, Ed, is that there has been a change since we've been through COVID. That ramp up that we were getting has been impacted by COVID, so it's kind of slowed it a little bit down for us.
Slightly, yeah. Very, very slightly. It has actually slowed. So there we go. Now, can you, if I end the poll there, can you see that? Can everyone see that? Okay. Is that showing on the screen for you?
Yep, so I can see a result there, Ed.
So the result was actually 60. So no one can see it. Let me just share the results. Can you see that now? Yes, brilliant. I've won over technology. I am fitting into my stereotype already. Yeah, so actually you're correct. It is actually, the life expectancy is 81. So there's some, and it's gone again here because I've stopped. But basically, yeah, most 60% of you got it right. It is actually 81 years old. So let me just take that off there. So let me just add a little bit to that. So in the 1840s, life expectancy was actually 40, and by 1930 it was 62, and now we've got it at 82. There's some really interesting research, and I'll give you the sort of so what in a moment. There's some really interesting research around this, and it's by Professor David Sinclair, and he contends that possibly somebody who might live to the age of 150 has already been born. And this is, he works at Harvard Medical School, and he does a lot of research around accelerating DNA repair. So he contends that, whether we believe that or not, checking out, that's David Sinclair's article on the first person to be born to 150. But what is relevant to this conversation is quite interesting, is that we may very, very in the near future start to build on those 5 generations, and it could possibly come to 6 to 7 generations over the coming years as people live longer. So if retirement age, as I said before, is going to continue to be redefined, and people say, actually, you know, I really enjoy my job, it just gives me real purpose. So I've got workplace flexibility. The working hours, I've got some flexibility there too. It's not 9 to 5 anymore. Coupled with the fact, actually, I've got a degree of financial need because things aren't, buttermilk, dairy products and stuff are just astronomically expensive. And I think about this as well, and improve physical stamina as well. We're talking about people living longer, to the point I was making earlier. If you've got that improved physical stamina, and people, and I've recently joined a running club, and my word, there's people in that club in their mid-70s to late 70s that are incredibly fit, running marathons and half marathons. So there's a few things to think about there, around the fact that actually we're going to be coming across a broader spectrum of ages within those teams. And whilst those characteristics that Shelley, and of course that Katie, yeah, noted. Thanks for joining this afternoon, and say we'll get the recording over to you. Whilst those characteristics that Shelley was talking about are really, really interesting, I think we've got to be careful about making those assumptions. To Shelley's point about actually, the First Lady could be a social media influencer and so on. We all know as HR professionals here that ageism is a form of bias and a type of discrimination that involves prejudice against people based on their age, similar to racism and sexism, holding those negative preconceived stereotypes about people from different ages. And of course, it affects everyone, whether you're older or quite just a grad, just starting off, or doing an apprenticeship in an organization. Both can be subject to those preconceived negative stereotypes, and you can see it in a wide variety of settings in the workplace. Then look, let's be clear, there's many challenges to diversity in the workplace, but one of the biggest can be attributed to those multi-generational teams. Negative stereotypes to work around working styles, different employee expectations. Younger generations have different expectations to possibly those that are baby boomers and so on, and communication gaps between them. All of these form long-held assumptions and biases. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at this later on and think about how we can start to dismantle some of these views and get the team working as productively as possible and smoothly alongside each other. But I think what is true is one of the keys to preventing generational bias is around empathy. So I think no one says it better sometimes for me than Simon Sinek's. So I'm just gonna share some thinking that Simon Sinek's got on this subject, and then I'm going to hand over to Shelley. So let's just get this, and I believe I have shared the sound, but let's just get this moving now.
Stereotypes obviously affect.
Can you hear that? Can someone put yes in the chat?
Because we create narratives that may or may not be true.
Thank you, Bryony.
And then treat people based on that narrative. So of course it's a problem. One of the biggest criticisms I get is that I cannot make generalizations about entire generations. Of course you can. Of course you can, because we are products of our own upbringings. And so there's a group of people whose worldview was formed based on the experiences they had when they came of age. In the case of millennials, they came of age at the millennium. They're the first generation to have cell phones and social media ubiquitous in their lives. The baby boomers came of age in the 60s and 70s, where you have the Vietnam War, you've got Richard Nixon, a massive cynicism of authority figures, and a rebellion to their sort of parents' sort of just work hard, sort of, and you'll do fine mentality, and became much more selfishly oriented. We know what happened in the 80s and 90s with the rise of mass layoffs as a business strategy, rank and yank, shareholder supremacy. This is all the product of the 80s and 90s. But we can absolutely make generalizations, and many of them are true. You know, our grandparents who may have lived through the Depression or the war, they're miserly and frugal. Well, there's nothing wrong with them. It's because they lived through the Depression and the war. So it affects who they are. So the most important thing is, instead of criticizing someone because of their worldview, because there's a lot to criticize up and down, is rather to have empathy, which is to try to understand that how one generation grew up is different to how we grew up, and to factor that into or filter that through the way we treat someone. Every generation has liability and has great weaknesses, and every generation has massive advantages. And this youngest generation, unlike previous generations, is way more accepting of other people who don't look like them or sound like them. They don't care what your sexuality or gender identity is. It's just a big non-issue. And it's got nothing to do with liberal or conservative or where you're from or north or south or whatever that stuff. As a generation, it's just not a big deal, right? They're much better at personal branding. They understand the importance of brand way better than, older generations think brand is your logo, and they're also talking about doing things with purpose. Now, it's very often said that millennials want to work for an organization that has a sense of purpose. Every generation wants to work for an organization with a sense of purpose. Millennials are just loud about it. Older generations just suffer in silence. And I applaud them for that, because what it does is it's part of the reason that so many companies are either are becoming purpose-driven or pretending to be purpose-driven is because of massive pressure from an entire generation. So I think empathy is king, and instead of criticizing, trying to understand and recognizing that not only can we teach them, we can also learn. Both ways, both ways.
Oh, Shelley, over to you. Eardrums need to be out there. Over that.
So we've talked today, haven't we, about kind of the idea of bias and assumptions that people make based on these different generations. But what we want to start to uncover in this session really is when we think about the idea of managing multi-generational teams or working in multi-generational teams, is the differences, the areas where conflict can come about. Because it really is important that in order to kind of unpack this a little bit further, that we start to recognise where some of those generational tensions and conflicts start to come about. So if we can move on to that, please.
Okay, so let's talk about generational conflict. And over to you. And thank you so far for engaging with us. We really, really do value that and appreciate it. So question to you, first of all, in the chat is, what is generational conflict? How would you sort of define that? Let's start with that. What is it? Over to you. Fingers on the keyboards, go. Generational, we're talking about generational conflict. What do we see that as? Yeah, lack of understanding. This is interesting. Yeah, communication has come out there. Wow, there's tons here.
Yeah,
different values. Holly, they're having different priorities, being judgmental. PC versus non-PC, different expectations, interesting clashes on how we. Wow, there's so much here. This is wonderful. Let me just have a look at my mum versus me. that's a great one.
That's a whole different webinar.
Wow, that I think we've got. There's another 2 hours here at least. Different value. Let's just go. I just want to go back and have a look at some of this. And
there's some real common themes coming through, isn't there?
Yeah. Opposing views, how we perceive things, misunderstanding, conflict in communication style. And we could talk about that. Not understanding how each other operates, the style of approach, not being able to see each other's points of view and where people are coming from. I think that's nice as well. Difference, yeah, style, difference in outlook again, different philosophies on life. Yeah, the difference is
saying about different life experiences there as well. And I think that's the point, isn't it? Because we have our perceptions based upon our own life experiences.
Absolutely, and difference the way that the way I want to work. Yeah, I've got mum versus me just gone past again. Judgmental. I've said that clashes with points of view, so different opinions. Yeah, levels of agility, Amanda. That's an interesting one there too. Different beliefs. The values and misunderstandings, making assumptions, different approaches, communication, not being able to put other people's shoes on, bias during recruitment as well. And I guess, yes, if you've got a younger team interviewing there and someone's a bit older there, perception about loyalty to an organization. That's because I like that. Technology.
It's true in terms of that loyalty piece, isn't it? Because we now know that our younger generations, they don't look for the same level of tenure. They will bounce through multiple careers during their lifetimes.
Yeah, I was reading, and it was a US study. Work for the Department of Labor said they expect people to have 12 to. At the moment, it's about 5 to 7 jobs, and they expect 12 to 15 in the future. That seems a lot. It sounds exhausting to me, but there we go.
I'm seconds, so I might have to get a move on.
just building up to it. A feeling of authority being challenged if there's a disagreement on approach, communication, different points of view, life experiences. Yeah, I mean, you've really, wow. No such thing as a job for life as well. That certain other generations, and we can definitely distill some of this, because there was a follow-up question here about what if you were to do the sort of laterals on my slide around which are the key areas there. There's certain ones we're going to talk about here, and I think really, Shelley, they've hit they've hit quite a few of
Yeah,
these
they've covered it,
already.
haven't they? Yeah.
Yeah. And so what we're going to do, Shelley and I are just going to just chip through this and just explore these in a little bit more detail, and bring these to life for you, because you're right, different generations have different styles, work styles, expectations, that is born by that Simon Sinek describes as they've all got a bit different backdrops. They're bound to have different experiences. That's fine. Different communication styles, expectations on how they want to receive the leadership and management, what a dress code is, and what is appropriate behavior. So we've sort of boiled it down into a few areas, and Shelley and I are just going to sort of have a little chat around some of these. And you've hit quite a few of these. You're too good. So first of all, technology. First of all, we've got, of course, Shelley, we've got those younger digital natives, generally more connected, more switched on, potentially, I say, in the rounds, more tech literate than those older groups. And where have you seen this come to life, Shelley? Question to you there.
Isn't it? I have this conversation with my kids, and I talk to them about, are you ringing me on the landline? Are you ringing me on the mobile phone? They don't use the term mobile phone, do they? It's just the phone. They only have one.
Yeah, I hadn't
or
thought
they
of
have
that,
multiple
actually.
because it might be work related. But when I think about it, because obviously I was, as being a Gen X, I was already kind of in work mode by the time we saw personal phones, mobile phones coming in, and we used to have kind of rules around it. If you're bringing your own personal mobile phone in, then it better go in your drawer, and you better not bring it out during office hours.
Absolutely.
Whereas that's really evolved now, hasn't it? When we see people who probably use it for work purposes, and they're messaging on it, and they might have multiple devices at any one time. So that acceptable personal usage, the dials had to move very much on that piece.
It's funny. The boys were talking to me and they said, "Dad, why do you say, please leave a message on my answer machine?" It's not an answer machine. I said, well, it was an answer machine when Dad, what is an answer machine? But my sons are 16 and 14. So, and there is this thing about younger workers wanting that, generally that cutting edge technology. They find it very user friendly, and they want to satisfy that sort of that need for technology. And we do hear, I mean, when we're in multiple sessions of this, older colleagues sometimes, as I say, being a little bit more anxious around and keeping up with the technology, and so how do we do that? How do we share that, and so on? So inevitably, there's going to be tensions there, but they're not irreconcilable. And they can be navigated, which we'll of course come on to in a moment. But yeah, we see it. We see a little bit of that coming up. Now this I really like, the communication and the method adopted. So when I started in finance in the 1990s, I used to come into the office in the morning, listen to the messages on the answer machine, and there would be a phone book there would be printed materials, and the fax machine had basically, so anyone would have filled the room, and it was literally almost sort of waist deep. This machine would be, all these faxes come and you rip it off, and then and it was all very printed material, and of course I was working very much for, I guess, a boomer generation, being a Generation X, but that's what I witnessed, that very much the printed material part of communication, and that's what and that's just how things were done. And of course the advent of email for our generation was very much that sort of send me an email, and so on. But how have you, what's shifted, do you think, for Y and Gen Z around this sort of communication, and what's preferred?
So one of the things that we see, that we hear whenever I run this session, Ed, is the idea around communication. So if we take, for example, somebody ringing in sick, so people of our kind of more mature generations, they have this expectation of, I want you to pick up a phone and speak to me, and I want to hear your voice, and kind of going to hear poorly voice to see that you're genuinely sick and you're not coming into work. Exactly that. Whereas, quite understandably, our younger generations are like, well, why can't I just fire off a message, send you a WhatsApp, let you know that I'm not well? And actually, the only thing that we should really be married to is the idea of safeguarding. Is our person okay? Have they got somebody to support them if they're unwell?
Yeah.
Is that a conversation that we can have later on in the day with them? Why do we have to kind of have these ideas that we're truly married to? And actually, sometimes we have to let go of those, that set of beliefs that we've always worked with, and think about, are we holding on to something for the sake of holding on to it? Or is there a real reason why we need to do something? So in terms of those communication styles, I think we need to think about which ones we adopt.
Yeah, it's really interesting that about. And do you see this sort of, and I see it with my children. I didn't know what a fax was when I started work. I was asked to Claire, it's like, I actually hadn't either, because I come from university and come across a fax machine. But my children are very much about very bite-sized pieces of information as well, instead of a lengthy stuff. But it's what's required within the business as well, and that's something they will have to learn and understand as well, about where's that happy medium around what they prefer and actually what is required as well, not just sort of little sound bites and so on. And they do like those sort of those very short messages and so on. It's really interesting.
Yeah, my messages from my kids are like bullet points. Yeah. They're not going to use more words than they actually need to.
Can you pick up? And then K, which is okay, apparently.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's with the youth. Feedback. So we're getting more into the sort of the leadership and management and method and frequency there. And I think back to James McGovern's now gone down a trip down memory lane, trying to dial into the internet, and that sort of wobbly noise that was. I won't try and reproduce it. But when we're thinking about feedback and method and frequency, certainly I think my generation and the generation above, which I think I speak to with more authority, traditional. I think we described it very linear in that sort of approach, where conventional formats, feedback once a year, you sit down and I will possibly transmit that feedback at you. A couple of comments at the end. And I think I preferred always that more informal. What's come across with possibly those younger generations, so the Y and Z? What are you hearing on that one?
They want that more informal method generally, and obviously it does depend. What we always say is get to know your people. Know what your individuals want, because even though we talk about these generalizations, there will be different characters will want different things, but generally they just want something, again, a short, sharp bite, immediacy. You're doing well, it's going great, it's not going great, this is what you need to do. They want that simplicity, and they don't want to be waiting for the full end of year review or the half year review. They just want that regular little bite-sized piece which tells them what's happening and what they need to do.
Absolutely. And I'd back you up in terms of sort of the leadership development and performance management essentials, which I was talking about only the other day, about actually best practice is really a regular cadence of catch-ups anyway, instead of that just like that one fire and forget at the end of the year. And the last one I think we should talk about is really this sort of work-life balance and so on, because of course everything's been thrown up in the air with COVID anyway, hasn't it, at the end of the day? What does this mean for people? So people traditionally think, well, this work means being in the office, and it goes on between here and quite late at night if you want to be seen and presenteeism. But that's been shaken up a bit, hasn't it, really?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it's about this younger generation being actually a lot noisier about that expectation of what's right and what suits them. And I think industry dependent and role dependent, there is still definitely. I think of my daughter who works in the advertising industry, she works crazy hours. If I think of my son who works in the tech industry, 5 o'clock hits and he's out of that door. So I think it does depend on that, but I think they are prepared to be noisier about what they want, about what they expect. And I think that idea of kind of putting up and doing it as we used to do, and putting in the hours and answering emails at crazy hours a night, I think that they push back on that, and actually quite rightly. I think I still track my kids on Find My Phone, so I know where they are at any one time. And my son, who is working in London, I messaged him to say, I can see that you're still kind of at the tube, and should you not be in work at 9 o'clock? And he's like, chill, I'll get there at 5 past, 10 past. They're not worried about that. It's about what I do when I'm there. And I'm like, really? Okay,
it's about outputs.
kind of different to the way that I think, but okay. So, you know, we've got employers that are really now focusing on outputs rather than inputs, which, you know, I think can definitely be a real benefit.
Yeah, there's some really interesting stuff here on the chats about needy people wanting constant feedback, but only good feedback. And actually, is that necessarily the right thing to do there? To your point there, that actually if someone's got stuff that needs to be heard, then it needs to be transmitted. So look, thank you. And conscious, you know, we have but minutes few, but generational conflict. Let's move that on a little bit more now. Shelley, do you want to just talk a little bit around this sort of managing conflict?
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Ed. So, you know, now that we've kind of established kind of where those kind of push points tend to be, what we need to start to think about was actually how can we start to manage that within what we know now, you know, a very frequently multi-generational workforces. And we're going to look at the benefits of some of those a little bit later on. But the first one that I want to think about is this idea of establishing norms for working together. What we need to do is we need ideally to have situations where teams are able to work out what the norms are, and actually I'll share some more details shortly on that, about collective preference and what needs to be achieved as part of a team, rather than necessarily just thinking about those individual needs of each member of the team. Because whilst individual preferences matter, actually if we think about that our collective goal is around our client, our customer, whether that be an internal or an external one, then surely their needs need to really take priority over that piece. So I'm going to share more of a strategy around that shortly. But let's look at the next one around really kind of dismantling those stereotypes one at a time. We've taken a little bit of time today to start to think about, you know, some of those generational differences. And the reason that we need to explore what those are is because only by recognizing that they exist can we start to kind of break them down a little bit and think about, is our mindset to a particular way of thinking? You know, self-awareness is a big part of that. So really kind of criticizing your own judgment at times around things. You know, managers need to be in touch with their own mindset, their own beliefs, their own values, to think about, when I'm bringing this to the workplace, is actually that just because that's my set of beliefs or the way I've always done things? And actually, could there be a different way, a better way, a more productive way, and a way that actually makes my team work more productively together? So, you know, we find that tends to be really positive as well. And then the third side of it is really that idea, I say, of uniting around common purpose. You know, that we want the idea of really what starts to unite us and what makes us work together best as a team. So really when we unite around the common purpose, say that being the client, internal or external, and really recognizing kind of some of the things that tend not to unite us, then we can find the way forward as that multi-generational team. So let me just explore on the next slide, if you will, really this idea of establishing norms of working together and how we can do it. The first stage of that is to acknowledge it. So we really need to think about, if we don't accept something exists, then we can't deal with it. So by acknowledging that the problem exists, then hopefully we find the way forward of dealing with it. The next way apart from that is kind of the appreciation. It's the why and not the what is the common need. It's the what that divides, it's the why that unites us. So just by accepting that somebody else's perspective may be different to yours and yours doesn't have to be right, is a real way we start to kind of come about those norms for working together. Once we've done that, we then need to kind of have this idea of how to flex. So that's about how we accommodate the different approaches, how we look at, you know, what other people's needs are, and then really start to leverage. So where we think about these multi-generational teams, and we have people that have different skill sets, different abilities, if we leverage the kind of the real skill sets around every generation, then what we get is this brilliant team who can buddy and support each other, and really make a difference. So where we've got people who are really, you know, tech able and people are really good communicators, that actually we combine those skills so that we get that brilliant team that are capable of everything. And then the final piece, that's so you can just pop me onto the resolve piece, Ed, is if we find that flex isn't enough, then we have to do that idea of uniting around that common goal in terms of, what is it that our client wants? So if, for example, we have a client, a customer who likes us to communicate in writing by email, then it doesn't matter what our personal preference is. Actually, we should be doing what they want, because that's the correct way forward. So the resolve piece is where we adapt the flex and just come to a resolution between us. So hopefully that gives people some ideas of how we then start to do that.
Fantastic, Shelley. Thank you. And what we wanted to do, look, we've spoken today about those 5 generations, and I think, Shelley, you know, you really brought them to life for me there, and generational stereotyping and potentially how to begin to manage generational conflict. One of the things that towards the end of the session here, we wanted to sort of really celebrate the positives of leading a multi-generational workforce. And again, thank you so much for everything that you've thrown into the chat there. I'm just preparing myself now for the question. So what do those that are dialing in here this afternoon see as the real benefits to having this big multi-generational workforce? What? Dialing in. There we go. Yes. Yeah, so well spotted. Yeah, absolutely. So what have we got here? Yolanda, yeah, thank you. You learn from each other. Life experience. Yeah, diversity of views. I'm learning from you, bring all this experience, even if it's just 21 years or it's 40 years or whatever, different perspectives. You can maximize output from that and improve problem solving, Nick. That's a really important one, isn't it? People bringing different views. Look, oh, I've seen this before. Oh, where? Well, I did it. We talked about it at college on a project. Idea to reassurance. I like that as well. Reassuring each other. All those diverse experiences. So there's diversity, there's reassurance that you've got the breadth and depth in the team there to be able to handle anything, really. Better outcomes in terms of inclusion if all groups are considered. Yeah, there's healthy difference there. Wow. I mean, it does make you humble and open-minded. And I think one of the things that I've really taken from working in a multi-generational team myself is just, you know, and obviously being a father as well, I learned so much from, and certainly from my 14 and 16-year-old son. Like, there's so much I can learn there, but it's being open-minded to it. And I think that's an interesting one that's there. They makes you humble and open-minded because there's so much we can learn from each other. Thank you. So some of the things that we've got here for you is, yes, that absolutely backs up all the things that you've thrown there into the chat. Yes, looking at things from different angles there, lots and lots of different perspectives, all those incredible minds from all sorts of different backgrounds, all those different life experiences, no matter how many years people have been on the planet, is fantastic there. Skill sets to great use. That one of the things we were thinking about, of course, is, you know, you pair up and you do upward mentoring as well. You pair up the older generational workforce or people in your team with younger, and they're sharing knowledge on both sides there. So skill sets can be put to good use there. Innovation, I think, it was mentioned several times there, and I think it makes it look like a healthier talent pipeline. And this is the only person that should be on a pipeline, which is just manifestly wrong. Sharing a best practice. All of those experiences, all those people, no matter what age they are, will come across have some excellent ideas, some excellent abilities and skills and so on. And that can be shared. So all that knowledge can be thrown into that pudding bowl and shared. And one of the things that I had not really considered until fairly recently was this last point here, that actually there's a commercial imperative here as well for me, that when you've got a workforce that actually represents more of the target market, then that they're able to anticipate and respond to those needs accordingly, which, you know, makes perfect sense, really. So they can appeal to a broader target market out there in the commercial sector. So it's actually it can really improve sales as well. So lots and lots of really good good thinking there around actually this makes commercial sense as well. We've got a video that we'd like to share with you that really, I think, brings out the spirit of what we've been talking about. But Shelley, we're coming to the dying embers here, but just what's been your take on the session here this afternoon? And thank you for everything that you've said so far.
Yeah, I mean, I love this video because I do think that it says it all. But I think, until you start to break it down, we don't really think about what those 5 generations, as we say, will be 6, will be 7 generations really bring. And I think in terms of having a forward strategy, in terms of attracting and retaining talent, that actually by really capturing the skill sets and the benefits of having these multi-generational teams, then it really kind of future-proofs us.
Yeah.
So I think that if we're really smart, we get on board with it, and we challenge our own perceptions around some ideas that we have, and we embrace the future.
Thank you. And for me, I think Simon Sinek says it really well. It's about this, it's about understanding. It's about empathy. Of course, people are different, but of course, how can we use that to best effect as well? And thank you. And thank you to you. We're going to close out now on this. Age doesn't define you. And I think this just says it all. And thank you very much for all the interaction that you've given us this afternoon. Here we go.
So what's this all about?
Can say it again, so I'm too old for this.
You just want me to say what people say about me.
Weird question, I guess.
My teacher says you'll grow out of it. It's just a phase.
It was never a phase. I never grew out of it.
I guess I'm too reckless, I don't know.
People like to talk very loudly to me.
They say I don't think things through.
You're looking still good for your age.
I'll figure it out when I'm older.
You are having a senior moment.
When the focus is on my age,
Life seems to get a little bit harder.
It feels like I'm not given a chance.
I need to keep up.
Or get out of the way.
I lack experience.
Or too much experience.
I'm baggage.
Only weighing people down.
Looking at my age,
Like it is a disease.
Where I work,
no one takes me serious.
It makes me feel powerless.
And it hurts.
When people see only my age.
Wonderful. I find that very powerful. I've watched it 20 times, but I love it every time. Just remains me to say thank you so much. And thank you very much for your thanks as well. Shelley, always a pleasure to work with you again. And Vasilis, thank you for coming to support us this afternoon.